Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. A Life in Pieces. They say your life flashes before your eyes before you die. You get one last chance to reminisce about your past. Images play through your mind, reminding you of the happy memories and grief-stricken struggles. As Ahsoka felt the emetic sting of death, her thoughts dwelled on her husband. She missed him terribly and would never get to say goodbye. She shed a single tear as memories came flooding back to her. Ahsoka stepped outside of the mansion and slowly walked down the stairs. It was truly a beautiful planet, Raxus. And it was a shame that she'd eventually have to leave. She walked past the senator's son, Lux. His thoughts were centered on her, his gaze shifting to her lightsabers. "You're a Jedi, aren't you?" he called after her. "Yes." She turned to face him. "Why do you ask?" "Before the war, I was always told that Jedi were good." "And now?" She was genuinely interested as to what he would say. Even among the citizens of the Republic, Jedi aren't always esteemed. He hesitated a moment, as if remembering a particular conversation, and stood up to follow her. "I don't know anymore. There are lots of terrible things happening. A lot of killing. And now my friends are saying that the Jedi are to blame." She could sense his curiosity radiating through the Force. "I'm the first Jedi you've ever met, aren't I?" "Well, yes," he mumbled. Ahsoka stopped. "Look at me. Am I so bad?" She realized her mistake after the words left her mouth. He gave her a once-over, his eyes lingering in places they shouldn't have been. "No, not bad at all," he said more optimistically. One didn't need to be a Jedi to know that he was referring to her appearance and not her Jedi demeanor. That much was nothing new to Ahsoka. "Well, it seems boys are the same, whether they're Republic or Separatists," she said dismissively. "Wait, how many of us have you actually met?" Lux asked, not to be outdone. "What?" "Well, I mean, you think we're all the bad guys, but how many of us have you actually met? Androids don't count." Ahsoka really hadn't thought about it that way. It was true, she didn't think about common Separatist citizens as much as she should have. "Well, other than military officers like Grievous and Ventress, none, I guess. You and your mother are the first." "Well, look at me. Am I so bad?" "I suppose not," she thought to herself. "You win this round, Monteri." The scene shifted. Ahsoka was standing alone by the wall of the ball to celebrate Onderon's freedom, sipping champagne. No one had asked her to dance, and she wasn't interested. Her master insisted that she dress up and attend as a guest as a reward for all the hard work she'd done. But she wasn't much of a dancer and didn't find social gatherings such as these very entertaining. After downing a second glass of the bubbly drink, she began to feel a bit queasy. She preferred to remain sober. The idea of being drunk did not appeal to her at all. As she was starting to approach the doors to leave, someone grabbed her wrist. She turned around, startled to see Lux Monteri smiling down at her. "Don't go. You're just as much a hero as any of us, if not more." She blushed, in spite of herself. The musicians played their last chord, and the song ended. Lux let go and extended a hand. Miss Miss Tano, may I have this dance? Ahsoka sighed, giving in to her whirling emotions. Of course, Mr. Bonteri. She took his hand, and they walked to the dance floor together in time for the next song. Lux placed a hand on her waist, and their free hands met. The music began, and Ahsoka relaxed. She didn't want to be miserable the whole night. How could she? Lux had asked her to dance. Their feet moved together in perfect sync. Her heart beat faster as her thoughts dwelled on Lux. In her mind, he was just so perfect. His gray robes complemented her sapphire dress, almost like he knew what she was going to wear. His eyes were irresistible and made Ahsoka melt inside. It was almost as if he could read her mind. Lux knew exactly how to move to the music, making their dance seem elegant and graceful. All she had to do was follow. In that moment, the Jedi Code was just empty words. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't suppress her feelings for Lux. Each move left her breathless. He twirled her around gently, allowing her dress to flow around her ankles. His lips brushed against her forehead, sending a tingling sensation down her spine. She could definitely tell that he was an experienced dancer. He was soft yet clear with where he intended on taking her, inviting her to follow along. If she made a mistake, he went with it rather than forcing change. It was then that Ahsoka decided to let go. She felt more alive than in any battle, and nothing else seemed to matter. There was no point in trying to pretend that she wasn't falling madly in love. The music slowed. The couples faced each other to exchange a bow and curtsy. Lux took her hand and kissed it tenderly. I think I'll stick around for a little while longer, she smiled. The scene shifted to show Ahsoka walking out of the Senate building from a meeting with the newly instated Senator Bonteri about security plans for his next trip to Raxus. It was Separatist-controlled space, and most likely being monitored by Count Dooku, and it wouldn't be safe to return without some form of protection. He had requested Ahsoka specifically to accompany him. She was infatuated by their meeting, so much so that she did not sense the imminent danger. Just as she was rounding the corner, someone grabbed her from behind and placed a firm hand over her mouth. There was a sharp pain in her side, and she fell unconscious. When she woke up, her kidnappers had imprisoned her behind bars in a place she didn't recognize. She couldn't pinpoint where in the galaxy she was through the Force. Electric shackles held her in place and made it quite impossible to sense just about anything. The doors opened and two figures walked in front of the bars. One she knew to be Count Dooku. The other she didn't recognize due to a hood covering his face. Ah, the young Jedi, the Count began. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Padawan Tano. Dooku? She muttered under her breath. What do you want with me? He inspected his nails. It's not as much what I want with you as what I want with someone else. A hologram appeared of Lux. She gasped, suddenly realizing the game that Dooku was playing. Lux's eyes widened. Ahsoka! She remained silent, trying not to give Dooku any more leverage than he needed. Senator Bonteri, it's been a while, the Count said. Lux had a similar reaction to Ahsoka's. Dooku, he snarled. No, Senator, there is no need for that. I have contacted you with a proposition. In my possession, I have Ahsoka Tano. She is to be kept safe with me until you agree to a simple proposition. His expression hardened. Name it. You have overthrown my government on Onderon, and have chosen to side with the Republic. This cannot be allowed. If Onderon realigns itself with the Separatist Alliance, I shall set your Jedi free and overlook all other Undesirable information. If you do not comply within the next rotation, she will be terminated immediately. Ahsoka knew what Lux was thinking, and she couldn't allow it to happen. No, Lux, she shouted to the hologram. Don't do it. His form turned to face her. I can't let you die, Ahsoka. You know that. Don't sacrifice the freedom of thousands of people and an entire way of life to save one person. Purpose comes before feelings. His eyes blazed with determination as he turned to the Duke. I'll be there as soon as I can. The hologram faded away, and the Count left her to her thoughts. Hours passed, and there was no sign of her master or Lux. She was sure Anakin would come for her sooner or later, as he always did. Before she knew it, a rotation had passed, and no one had come. She stood in front of Count Dooku and the other man she didn't recognize. It's a shame, little Jedi, that no one cared enough to come for you. I'm not so little anymore, she retorted. We'll see. Since Senator Von Terry has not done what I ask, you shall die. I volunteered to do the honors myself. She rolled her eyes. Oh, how kind of you. Don't worry. I'll be sure to make it slow and painful. He didn't hesitate to zap Ahsoka with lightning through the Force. She screamed in pain, and he stopped. She was given a moment to catch her breath, and the electricity flowed from his fingers again and again. The hooded man beside him joined in, pushing her past her limits. Just as she was beginning to give up, an explosion shook the room, sending the Count and his Sith counterpart off balance. Come, Harris, the cloaked man said. Our presence has been requested elsewhere by those who wish to see the Jedi again. The pair got up and left Ahsoka in her cell. Just as they left, a pair of legs dangled from the ventilation shaft. After some fidgeting, Lux dropped from the ceiling. Ahsoka! He ran to her and deactivated her restraints. She fell in a heap on the floor, lacking the energy to stand. Kneeling down, Lux braced her and helped her stand up. Lux, why did you come after me? Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful, but I thought I told you not to. I love you too much to let you die. What? Ahsoka wasn't sure she heard him correctly. Darn it, he muttered. A look of panic crossed his face. Nothing, let's just... Ahsoka pressed her lips to his, surprising him. She didn't care about the consequences. What if she had died before he got to her? She wouldn't have gotten the chance to tell him how she feels. Lux loosened up, kissing her back with equal emotion. She wrapped her arms around his neck to hold herself up as she melted into his arms. His soft lips sent a current running through her body. She looked him in the eye before giving him a hug. I love you too, she whispered in his ear. Thanks for the rescue. She remembered a particular morning after their wedding, not too long ago. Ahsoka woke up with incredible nausea. It was early in the morning. The sun still hadn't risen. She sat up in bed, careful not to wake her husband Lux. When she stood up, she was hit with a wave of dizziness. She braced herself by placing a hand on the wall beside her. Lux stirred. Where are you going? He said, still half asleep. It's not time for you to go, is it? No, not yet. I don't feel very well for some reason. She staggered to the fresh air and vomited. Afterwards, she felt fine. Quickly, she brushed her teeth and washed her face. She turned around and almost ran into Lux, who was leaning on the doorframe. Feel better? A little. Good. He gave her a hug and led her back to bed. Ahsoka woke up late the next morning. She had a headache, and the nausea was starting to come back. Lux was gone. He had probably already gone to work. He left her a note on her nightstand. It read, I have a busy day in the Imperial Senate planned, so I left a little early. How are you feeling? I would have asked, but I didn't want to wake you. You need to stay home and take a day off. I've already taken care of your duties with the rebellion. Saw owed me a favor. You expect too much of yourself. Everyone needs a break sometimes. Don't worry about it. I don't want to hear from Kanan that you went in today. Call me if you feel sick again. Of course he would do something like that. She wanted to go into work, but Lux was probably right. There were times she would forget to eat and sleep because she was so involved in what she was doing. It wasn't healthy, but she didn't particularly care. That was probably what brought this on. But something felt off. She felt something through the Force. Swinging her legs to the side of the bed, she closed her eyes and meditated. There was another presence in the room. That of a child. Her hands flew to her stomach, realization dawning. She reached for her comm link and called Lux. He picked up almost immediately. Are you all right? He asked before she could say anything. Yes, I think so. Something happened, and I'm coming home. Are you safe? Yes, of course. You don't need to come home. I'm fine. No, you aren't. I can tell. There was a pause. I'm walking out now. I'll be there as soon as I can. Ahsoka sighed. All right. I love you. I love you too, Ahsoka. A short time later, Lux walked in the door. He threw down his briefcase and slid out of his coat. Immediately, he ran to Ahsoka and kissed her passionately. He held her in his arms, wordlessly expressing his love. His eyes widened. What happened? You're trembling. She bit her lip. Lux, I'm pregnant. He stared at her in disbelief. What? We're going to have a baby. She looked away, not sure how he was going to take it. That's wonderful. I don't know what to say. He knelt down in front of her and rested his head on her stomach. We're looking forward to meeting you, little Bonteri. He planted a kiss just above her belly button and stood up. I can't believe we're going to be parents. Before she knew it, Ahsoka was laying down in the medical bay of a rebel command ship. She let out a cry of pain, and a nurse came running into the room. She's coming, Ahsoka murmured through the clenched teeth. Her stomach contracted, sending shooting pains circulating through her abdomen. The nurse certainly hadn't lied when she said it would be painful. She screamed again, and Lux took her hand. Squeezing it tightly, she tried to take a breath. Then it came. A small gush of water came from her body, and they all knew it was time. All right, Miss Tano, it's time to push. Ahsoka nodded feebly, trying not to scream, even though it felt like her insides were being ripped apart. The nurse called in some support and ran some tests on a datapad. Uh-oh, this isn't good, she exclaimed. Lux's eyes went wide. What's not good? Something's not right. There's a lethal infection that could mean the death of the mother and child. It's a 50-50 chance they'll both survive. 20% chance one or the other will die. Are you sure? Positive. Unfortunately, all we can do is wait. I'm going to throw up, Ahsoka said between screams. Her body was hot and heavy. She could feel the sweat dripping down her face. It felt like she was drowning in Mustafarian lava. She knew giving birth was supposed to be a happy moment, but she just wanted the pain to end. Nurses hovered over her, discussing something she couldn't begin to comprehend in her present state. Lux stood beside her, clutching her hand, looking sick himself. Do you need water? The nurse asked in a comforting voice. Ahsoka shook her head. I know it's absolutely miserable, but you're almost there, another nurse said. Something on the monitor screen was flashing. The same nurse looked at it and gulped. The vital signs are dropping fast. Just keep breathing, my love, Lux reassured. He turned to a nurse. Are you absolutely sure there's nothing you can do to keep both of them from dying? There has to be something. His gaze fell. I can't lose you, Ahsoka. She shook her head. We can't administer an antidote at this stage without death or risking permanent brain damage to the baby. Their conversation was making Ahsoka even more worried. Please come out, baby girl, she thought to herself. It's time for you to see the galaxy. She didn't know what she would do if her baby didn't make it. She'd rather die herself than live without her. With one final push, her little daughter came out, and Ahsoka blacked out. When she awoke, Lux was sitting on the bed beside her, his hand wrapped in a brace. The other was holding hers. There was only one nurse remaining in the room, running tests on the baby. The child was crying loudly, which meant that she had lived. Ahsoka breathed a sigh of relief, alerting Lux that she was awake. She gave his hand a slight squeeze. Ahsoka, he bent down and pressed his lips to hers. How long was I out? The pain was starting to subside. Long enough to give us a good scare. And the baby? He smiled, looking over at the child. Perfectly healthy. Perfectly healthy. You did it, Ahsoka. She smiled for the first time. Well, what happened to your hand? She asked, looking down. Well, you were squeezing it really hard, and I didn't even notice until I let go for a moment. There are a few broken bones along the side, but nothing too serious. Ahsoka gasped and brought a hand over her mouth. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. He chuckled. It's all right. I'd much rather have you alive. The nurse brought over their baby, wrapped in a soft blanket. She handed her to Ahsoka. Shh, Ahsoka whispered to the bundle. The baby stopped crying immediately. The Force was strong with her. That much was clearly evident. She had light orange skin with white markings similar to Ahsoka's, but the roots of brown and blue hair coming out of her scalp. You're beautiful, sweetheart. Have you thought of a name? The nurse asked them both. Ahsoka and Lux looked at each other. I like Raya as a first name, Ahsoka suggested, and Padme as a middle name. You know how important she was to both of us. Lux nodded. What about a last name? Bon Tano? Yes, that's perfect. Raya, Padme, Bon Tano it is. Ahsoka blinked, coming back to the present. Darth Vader swung his blade down, intent on slicing her in half. Part of her wanted him to kill her. How could she live with herself, knowing what her master had become? The other half urged her to fight back. She couldn't leave her husband and daughter alone. Lux had lost enough loved ones in his life, and she didn't want Raya growing up without a mother. She swung her saber upward, blocking his blow and knocking him back. No, Vader, she yelled over the self-destructing temple. I'm not going to die today. There's still hope for all of us, even in the darkest times. Love will always prevail.